What if the man you loved, the father of your children, the one you built a life with, died in a tragic car crash? And that was just the beginning of the heartbreak. Emma Samuel thought she had it all. A beautiful home, a loving husband, and 3 wonderful kids. But the day Jlloyd Samuel left to drop the kids off at school was the day everything changed forever. He never came back, killed in a devastating car accident that left her world literally in ashes. And then the truth unraveled. No money in the bank, secret lives exposed, another wife, another country, a double life she never saw coming. So how do you survive that? How do you grieve a man you loved and the betrayal he left behind? How do you raise 3 children, rebuild your life from scratch, and find the strength to forgive? Today, I sit down with Emma Samuel to ask the question that matters most. So, what's your story? You might recognise today's guest from the Netflix sensation, The Footballer, His Wife and the Crash. Because in the studio today, I'm joined by Emma Samuel. Welcome, Emma.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, if you haven't watched the documentary on Netflix, why not? That's what I'm going to say to you, because it really is worth watching. And I would recommend it to you. It's a story really of finding true love, finding the one.
Yeah.
And then marrying the one.
Yeah.
Who she didn't know at the start was a professional footballer. She lived life as a wag.
Yeah.
You know, you did. We can't hide that, you know.
How times have changed.
how times have changed. We'll come to that, right? In a mansion in Cheshire. She raised 3 beautiful children. And then her world literally imploded on one day where her late husband, Jlloyd, was in a fatal car accident. But then as this story unfolds, Emma discovers that Jlloyd was leading a double life.
Yeah.
Because he worked abroad as a footballer in Iran, and whilst he was out there, he married somebody else while still being married to Emma. So she's left heartbroken, shocked, financially ruined, and starts her then life, a new life, as a widowed single mum to 3 children. I keep saying 2 and it's 3. I know it's 3.
Yeah.
So, and Emma's here today to talk about her life that's not on the Netflix documentary. Because what's happened since that incident, since that fateful night, she's going to share the details of here. And I'd encourage you to listen or watch right through to the end. Because since that day on the 15th of May, 2018, Emma's been on a big discovery journey, not just grieving and getting financially more stable, but raising 3 beautiful children on her own. But she's also now come through that with some strengths and some techniques that she's going to share on this episode that she's learned from her rebirth and loving her life again.
Yes.
Welcome to So What's Your Story, Emma.
Thank you so much.
It's all right. So today's not about the Netflix documentary, but we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Just to give the listeners a bit of context.
Yes.
But yeah, you look so different. That's the first thing I'm going to say. If you do watch the documentary, you're going to watch this and go, is that the same woman? Because you've done a lot of, haven't you?
Yeah, I do get that a lot.
When was that filmed?
It was filmed 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3, nearly 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And it originally went on ITVX for 2 years before it actually reached Netflix.
Right, I didn't know
And
that.
it's now on Disney UK as well.
Right, yeah. So it's everywhere.
It's everywhere now.
But you do look different.
Yeah, I do. It was a lot of hard work, you know, but I did have to look in the mirror at one point and think, right, you need to get yourself back to where you used to be.
Yeah, because it's not easy, is it? I mean, you know, you met Jlloyd when you were what, 21?
So I was 20, he was 19. He was just turning 20 and I was just turning 21.
Wow. And it was instant attraction.
Yes.
It was instant attraction. And, you know, as the story unfolded, you'd sort of, you know, there was a lot to work through, wasn't there? Because if you do watch the documentary, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the end of it is the simple fact that Jlloyd has been leading a double life, as I said in the intro.
Yes. So obviously that was quite difficult for me to process.
Yeah.
Purely because not only was I was grieving for 3 children as well as myself. So I think you tend to do your own grief at a later date because you're naturally just grieving for your 3 children at that moment in time. So not only was I dealing with grief, I was therefore dealing with, finding out about the other woman, how serious it was with the other woman. It was quite hard for me to accept that. I actually do think, he was really in love with her. And I even cried watching the documentary back to myself when I watched Helia speaking.
Yeah.
It brought tears to my eyes because not only did I lose somebody that I love, I did feel compassion towards her feelings because she'd also lost somebody that she loved and she'd been told her story and I'd been told my story, so we both only knew what we were being told at the time from Jlloyd. And that's the thing, none of us will ever get answers because the only person who can give us answers is Jlloyd himself. And unfortunately, we're not going to get that.
No, because he was in a fatal accident. He was taking the kids to school. He didn't come back.
Yes.
But within this potted history of your relationship, there's highs and lows all the way through it, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
Because he became a professional footballer. At one point, he's earning 20 grand a week.
Yes.
Then he loses his job. Then he gets an injury. Then he has to go and work abroad. Then he gets into a bit of gambling. Well, quite a lot of gambling.
Yes.
At one point, it was 13 grand a day when you spotted it online.
Yeah.
13, and that's a lot of money. There was some cheating going on. He had a double life. You then, when you lost him, not only the grief for you, your children, and as you mentioned, so compassionately about the other woman, but there was then allegations that you'd bumped him off.
Oh, yeah. So, one of my children even said, "Mummy, I'm not being funny. You're not that clever."
So, all right. And I said at the head of this, I don't really want to focus on that documentary per se, because if you want to watch it, please go and view it. And I do recommend it. It's difficult to watch at times, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. And it's difficult to see you on screen, Emma, because I can't imagine having to relive that, and you got emotional more than one occasion, and so rightly so you would. You love Jlloyd and still do.
And still do, yeah. And I think for some viewers who were watching it could probably not understand, from all the highs and lows, why I've still got so much love, but he's the father of my children.
Absolutely.
And, I've had so many nice times and amazing memories with Jlloyd.
Yeah.
And he was a huge part of my life, and it's just, you don't want to forget.
No.
And I never will.
I don't think you should forget.
And I definitely won't. It'd be very hard for someone to fill his shoes.
So since that fateful day then, and what was it, nearly 7 years ago, was it?
Yes, so it was 7 years this May.
So it's 15th of May.
15th of May.
2018.
Yes.
Yeah. How have you coped? Has there been, dare I ask, has there been drink, drugs, medication, therapy, maybe? Or maybe all of those?
All of it. All of it. We moved house 6 months after Jlloyd passed. And to be honest with you, I can't even remember moving.
Can't you?
We had to move. We couldn't afford to stay where we were. I don't even remember moving house. I don't remember much actually for the first 2 years, I think.
Don't you?
Just processing everything. And I was drinking too much. I could easily drink a bottle of wine, safely. If I knew I didn't have anywhere else to go with my children that evening, it's quite easy, I think, for me to have opened a bottle of wine whilst I was cooking, and then it'd progress into one, sometimes even two.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big girl, so I think that was a real low. But you don't realise it when you're in it.
No.
So it was obviously used as a coping mechanism for me.
Absolutely. And lots of people do. It's like a mask, isn't it? It's like it's a numbing technique.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you're feeling this grief. You've got 3 stunning children, you have, and we're going to talk about those if that's okay. You're very proud of them, and you're a protective mother. I sense that from you. We've only met a couple of times, but you always talk about your children. You're always doing stuff for them. The last time we met, you were dashing off to do something for one of them, and there was something going on, wasn't there? So I know your children are priority in your life,
100%,
and always have been, right?
Yes.
So when you're coming out of this process of loss and all of the other things that are compounded, the other woman, the financials, the this, the that, you're bound to some escapism
And I'm not surprised you say that you actually felt numb for 2 years.
And I do feel like, I mean, looking back now, because I'm out of that space, it is quite, I do feel like I've wasted 4 years of my life lying in bed, you know, being depressed. And I often look at my bed now and think, I hate you, you know, because I just see it as, I mean, I do love my bed and love going to sleep, but
you were spending way too long.
I was spending a lot of time. I was just watching random program. I mean, I think I'd seen everything on TV at one point, you know, and there was nothing left to watch. But it was just my way of coping. And, you know, it was quite difficult for my eldest son. I do feel like it was a lot of pressure for him to take on as the oldest child.
Do you think because he then felt that he was almost stepping into a father figure?
Yes, 100%. And I almost put a lot of pressure on my eldest son, almost like he was my husband.
Did you?
You know, and I think looking back now, and we both do often speak about it, you know, and it was a lot of growth for him and for me. And it's nice that we can talk about it in such a positive way now. But I put on him a lot, you know, and I regret that. But obviously we all did what we could do at the time to get through it. And we are such a strong little team.
Yeah, you are. You are. I know that. And, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because how do you process those points as you have now? You're in a very, very good place mentally and physically and everything. We'll talk about that, for you know, because if you don't mind, you know, you've made big transformations.
Huge.
I think you look great, by the way. Thank you for coming in today once again. But how do you process things like the cheating element and the loyalty that you thought was there? Because and I said we weren't going to talk about the doc. We're not. But it's just about the timelines, if we can, if that's okay with you. So in 2012, I believe I've got that right.
Yeah.
He met the other woman. So it wasn't as if it had been a 6-month thing. It had been for a long time.
Yeah.
And eventually married her under Iranian law, which isn't relevant in the UK, which isn't upheld in the UK. However, he did remarry.
Yes.
Whilst you were still
I've been told it was like a contract, which you can do sometimes in that country, where it's almost not a legal marriage, but it's with the intention to marry. But I'm not 100% certain on them facts, you know, but it's been portrayed that he was married.
How did that feel to you, knowing that at that time, Emma, you're married? You love him. He's the father of your children.
Well, I just think the worst part was I met the other woman a year before he passed away.
Wow.
So that was quite, you know, she was introduced to me as my mother-in-law's friend.
Wow.
I met her in Dubai. She was staying in a room with my mother-in-law. And I was in a room with my children, fighting for my marriage because, you know, there were cracks in the marriage. But like any mother and any wife, I was fighting. You know, I didn't want my marriage to break down at all. You know, we had 3 amazing children. And if anybody who knows Jlloyd and I, they all would say, we were like couple goals, you know, we were wild, we were, you know, crazy, but we matched. You know, we'd flirt, we'd make each other jealous, you know. It was just, but we somehow just matched.
I'm going to use this phrase. Your craziness in each other made you crazy for each other.
Yes, definitely. That's a good one. I might steal that.
There you go. Thought of that. There was a lot to process.
Yes.
So let's talk about moving forward then. How do you get to a position? You spoke about 4 years that you feel now, reflecting back, was a waste. But I'm not going to say that it necessarily was, Emma, because we all process grief and pain and betrayal. These are all the things that had happened to you. We haven't touched on the financials. I mean, I've wrote the number down here, so please forgive me for just turning the page. At one point, you were left with 2,000, at the time of you going through his financials. This was a footballer in his heyday. He was earning 20 grand a week.
Yeah.
He had a £1.8 million mansion in Cheshire.
2 million.
Or was it 2 million? Let's not forget that. 200K. It's important. So you looked through the financials and these numbers are coming down and down and down. You're staring down the barrel at £2,460 and 9 pence. That's it.
Yeah, and that was something that I couldn't even get access to because that's what was in Jlloyd's account at the time of him passing, which we put towards the funeral. So, and I had about £678 or something
Jesus
in my
Christ.
account at the time.
So you got less than £5,000
Yes.
for you, your kids. There was a point where friends were bringing food round for the children.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things to process.
A lot of friends did, send money and tried to help me in the best way that they could.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, sometimes a lot of friends that haven't been your friends for a long time, more so than the ones that are, and I think it's also a really big test to, when you go through something so tragic, you really do see who's there for you and who's not.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people do disappear.
No, they do.
And there was a lot of people in my house, for the first 2 weeks of Jay passing, and you don't see half of them people now.
I bet a lot of them were present when you were throwing your big swanky party.
Oh, yeah,
The champagne was flowing.
definitely.
They were the first ones there.
I mean, it's been good for me for growth though as well, because I think, I'm very particular about who I let in my life now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the world's best blocker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've mastered blocking now. If it doesn't sit right with me, or if if it's not good for my space and my own mental health, then I can't afford to have any setbacks now.
Yeah. Do you think that wasn't the case back in the day then? Do you think you were a bit of a people pleaser? You were
100%. I'm still learning to say no. I'm a very big yes person.
Yeah.
And I do wear my heart on my sleeve and tell people way too much about my life. Hence why I'm here. But that's always been the way I am, and I don't think I'm going to change now at 45 years old.
No. But talking about it, we spoke about this, didn't we, when I first asked you if you would, consider coming on the show. For you, it's almost like a cathartic process. It's always part of the healing process to sort of revisit where you were to where you are now, so you can reflect back and say, well, okay, I was putting my head under the duvet, but I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, and I think doing the documentary was really good for me as well, in terms of made me analyse our relationship a lot, looking through old videos and, pictures of us as a family. It actually made me think maybe I could have been a little bit more supportive when he was out of work, or, so it did make me question my own self and our relationship of what I could have done more in the relationship as well.
Not blame.
No, not blame.
But just reflect and just...
Yeah, reflect. I've never blamed myself for what happened, because, well, I think actually it'd be wrong to say I haven't, because I think sometimes you can relive the morning and think, well, if I'd not let him drive, or, if I'd have took the kids to school, or, there's a lot of things where you can... think maybe
that's sort of what ifs, isn't it?
But that's what I mean. That's all part of growth and the stages of grieving. You have to go through that. And now, I look at it completely different. There's nothing I can do about what happened that morning.
I wrote about your kids being your number one priority. They always have been. Are you okay for me to? Why don't you mention their names, because they're your children?
Yeah. So I have 3 children. Love them. So I've got Javon, who's my eldest, Lakyle, who's my middle son, and Amara, who is my baby girl. Well, she's not a baby anymore.
She'll go, Mum,
she'll always
stop saying that. Mum, you got to stop saying that. And let's talk about them slightly if we can. Is it okay? Because you are proud of them.
Very.
And interestingly enough, your eldest son has become a football agent manager.
Yes.
Yeah. Your middle son plays pro football.
Yes.
And your daughter is probably going to end up on the stage, TV or something like that, because she's a talented singer. She's a talented dancer. She's got it, basically, hasn't she?
Yeah. I don't know where I've got these 3 amazing children from. I've got none of them qualities myself.
Come on, Emma, you've got to take the credit.
I do often say, how have these kids come from crazy Jlloyd and I? But...
They're amazing, aren't they?
Amazing. I'm really proud. They've all, obviously, there were lots of things we did, and I did try to tell, to say, we've got to be so grateful for all the things that we have still got in life. And I know life isn't the same as what it used to be, but we've got there and we're sticking together, and you know, and they could have gone one way or the other, you know.
No, they could have.
You know, they could have fell off the rails, you know, turned to drink or drugs or, you know, and thankfully all three of them are thriving, very successful and determined to do well. It's good because I do think, you know, hopefully Jlloyd is watching down and he can just see what a great job I've done and how good they are.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. And, you know, we must mention your mum.
Amazing.
Mustn't we?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have got through. And I think, to be honest with you, when Jlloyd did first pass, I pushed my mum away. And I think it's because she's closest to me and I will never get it, you know, and I still don't understand why. But, you know, if she tried to talk to me, I would say, just go away, you know. And she really did feel pushed out, but I've got no idea why. But obviously it's all the emotions. It didn't last long, you know, I think it was for about 3 months. But I'm so close to my mum and I wouldn't have got through, you know, the last 6 years without my mum. She's always, even when the children were younger, you know, she enabled Jlloyd and I to be able to have holidays, you know, and because she was always there to babysit, always let us still have a life because we were young parents. So, you know, she's my biggest support.
I think it's important. And I'm not a therapist or a psychotherapist or anything near any of those qualifications, but I think often we do push people closest to us away. You know, they say that, you know, you hurt the ones you love, you know, and it's often the case because grief is a funny thing to deal with, you know, and we're all in our unique way of dealing with it. There's no formula, you know, there's probably a pattern of behavior that we go through. To hear that is not surprising. You know, when my mum passed, and my dad, I pushed people away from me. Yeah. You know.
And I think, you know, it's because we know they're always going to be there. You know, we know they're going to come back and still love us no matter what. And I think that is, you know, even some of my closest friends, I was so jealous of all my friends who still had a husband.
Were you?
You know, I couldn't do things with them. I used to look at them and if I spoke to them, I used to think, well, it's all right for you. You're going home back to your life. You know, you've still got your husband, you've still got your kid. You know, so it's not like I was jealous, but I resented them.
Yeah.
And I did stay away from a lot of people for quite a long time. And I think I shut myself away and became in a shell. You know, I couldn't see people. I couldn't be with them, you know, because, and it's not their fault, you know.
No, of course it's not.
I just had so much like resentment because they still had their life the same.
Yeah, well, yours was suddenly taken.
Suddenly,
it's not like, you know, any death is tragic. Any death under any circumstance. But this was, you know, I'll take the kids to school this morning and you know, and then not there. You know, 45 minutes you're sitting at home like, where are you? Messaging him and he's been in a car which has exploded. He's burnt to death on site. It is horrific. You know, it's horrific.
Yeah.
So there's no easy way to deal with death. There just isn't. But when it's that sudden and unexpected, and then of course, as we say, as the rest of it unpacks, goodness me, Emma, you know, I mean, you need to applaud yourself really because you've done incredibly well. If you just turn to a bit of booze and whatever else and pull the duvet over.
I know, and a lot of people do reach out to me and say, you've done a great job. I'm not great at complimenting myself. But when it comes to my kids, you know, it's one thing I can always say about myself. I have been an amazing mum. Going back to the, you know, tragic and sudden death, you know, a year and a half after my husband passed, my stepfather passed, and his was completely different because his was, you know, he had cancer and we had to watch him slowly.
Yes.
You know, so I went through 2 completely different types of death. And I've often thought to myself, you know, which one is worse? Would you rather them go instantly and not, you know, not know and know that there wasn't in any pain because it was just instant? Or would you want to watch somebody you love suffer
slowly
the way that I had to with my father? So, you know, that was hard.
Yeah, again, you know, very, very difficult to process and to deal with. I'm going to go back to, if I may, this financial abundance that you had. Because I have watched the documentary, and those that do watch it, you will see phenomenal life. They had a bowling alley in the house. They had you had big cars. You used to throw massive parties. it was phenomenal, wasn't it?
No wonder we ended up with no money.
Well, yeah. Well, no.
But lesson for all my children: don't throw big parties.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that. Actually, it's an interesting that you should bring that up. But you did have all that money. It was the high life. It was. Do you miss it?
Not so much now. I mean, I don't miss, all the parties, and I think I'm just more cautious with money. So I think if I had it again, it's just naturally my personality. I like to entertain and I'm a homemaker and I just like to have a nice home.
Sure.
And, so I think there's different elements of what you miss and what you don't miss from having that life.
Advice to anyone that's living that high life when actually behind closed doors, they're struggling a little bit. They're struggling financially, but they're trying to put on this facade for everybody else. Would you comment on that at all, Emma?
I don't think you ever know what's going on behind closed doors. This is why I'm so much more aware now of, how I speak to people myself, because you just never know what people are going through. And I think looking back, we could have done so many things different. And invested better, saved better, made a lot of better decisions. Yeah. But we were in our 20s, and we had 3 young children and life was great. And, you do not think all these things are going to happen to you.
True.
I never thought. I used to drive on the road and see flowers on the side of the road and think, oh, that's really sad. Somebody's passed away. And, but you never think one day maybe going to be you, or it's going to be something that you're living through and your family are going to go through. Yeah,
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, very much you were living for today, weren't you? And it was exciting.
And I think I still do. You've got to put one foot in front of the other every day.
But it was very exciting. It was a fast-paced life. He was a glamorous footballer, and so and there was lots of things going on there. So probably you are going to do what you did. Like you say, you were young as well, and it's like exciting. So I just was curious to understand whether, that anything that you've noticed in those giddy heights that you perhaps would change today, i.e., would you splash the cash so much? Would you?
Definitely not.
No.
You'd be more cautious about, like I said earlier, what you invest your money in, and I think as well. I think this does happen a lot when you're getting older as well. The cars become less irrelevant, the clothing becomes less irrelevant, and when you've got children, you don't really think about buying clothes for yourself anyway. It tends to be just for your kids.
Yeah.
So then I think things also do come with age. Apart from just what I've been through, you do have a lot of learning with time.
Yeah. I want to ask you about personal relationships. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because it's been a while. It's been since Jlloyd's passing. It's coming up for 6 years. You mentioned a long time of being in this depressive state. You have transformed.
Yes.
Give us a little bit about that, because you've done some work on your fitness levels, your body shape. You've sort of took your self-esteem back. You've sort of I'm
owning it again.
You're owning it. That's great. You're smashing it. You're smashing it out of the park. So tell us a little bit about that.
It was a realization last year. To be honest with you, January last year. I think we all want to change our life in January.
It's that time of year. Oh, New Year's resolution.
Yeah. So in January last year, I knew I was ready to maybe start dating again. I have dated on and off through the 6 years with just 2 people.
Would you say that, reflecting back, you weren't ready?
I wasn't ready 100%. I was still didn't know what I wanted, didn't treat them as nice because I was still in a very bad place.
Do you think you might have settled as well for something that you
100%.
Compromised to something that you wouldn't necessarily do now?
Yeah, 100%, because I wasn't feeling great in myself and I had no self-worth. So I almost felt like this is all I deserve. This is all I want.
Wow.
And I'd lost all my self-esteem.
Wow.
I wasn't confident, but I would put on this facade. So if I was to go out and you see me, obviously we get dressed up if we go out. We don't go out. So I'd walk into a place, I'd be like, hi, here I am,
Yeah. Heads would turn.
Yeah, and I think I'd kind of put myself out there and people would think, oh, she's fine, she's confident, and I just wasn't at all.
So,
I was
underneath
really
the surface.
Yeah, I was really struggling and I had no self-esteem, and I'd gained a lot of weight through the drink. I'd say mainly through the drink. I had this like puffy face, I just looked tired.
Yeah.
And if I look at pictures of myself, you can just see there's just nothing there. It's just, I was a completely different person. I look at that person and think, wow.
So when you look back then, you think to yourself,
I was empty.
That's wow. That's
and I can see that in my own self when I look at pictures.
So then, if you don't, it's the old thing, isn't it? If you can't love yourself, how can you love somebody else?
How can I expect anybody to love me if I don't love myself? And how can I love them?
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I had to do a lot of work on myself, and I did look in the mirror and just think, wow, who is this? I didn't want to look in the mirror. And it was a big realization. I thought, if you want to date, the type of guys that you probably want to date are not going to fancy you the way you look. So you need to change. You need to sort yourself out and you need to get yourself back. You need to have a glow up, as my daughter would say. So I had a glow up, I think. Anyway, and even if other people don't think so, I'm feeling good. So I don't care what people think.
That's great. That is great. We shouldn't care really about what people think.
And I did care too much about what other people thought, and
were you thinking too much
I used
about
to think, oh God, everyone's going to think I've gone fat and, I don't look the same. And, but it was understandable. I was going through a lot and was dealing with a lot.
But the important piece here as well is, Emma, how we look, how we present ourselves. So whether that be through our clothing, our looks, whatever it might be, that's one element of who we are.
Yes.
It's a very surface level, actually, of elements of who we are. A little bit like on Tinder or any of the other dating apps, Bumble, Hinge, whatever, yeah?
Yeah.
We've all been there, yeah, myself included. Swipe left, swipe right. Well, you are swiping. It's superficial, isn't it?
Oh, I tried the dating apps for like a week.
Yeah, well good.
I was like, no,
well, good for you for getting off them. But it is superficial. So what you're talking about, this look. But there's more to it, isn't there? Because you did a lot of work then when you'd on that January, when you looked in the mirror and go, fuck it, I don't like and not only don't you like the look of yourself, you don't like who you are.
I didn't like who I was, no. I didn't like the fact that I was drinking.
Right. Too much.
Too much, yeah. So, I'd completely changed that around. I don't drink at home now at all on my own.
Wow.
Because I was drinking on my own. And I think that's where the downward spiral is.
Yeah, it can be.
And I stopped drinking at home on my own. Yeah. I will still drink if I'm like out for dinner or if, social or if I've got friends round.
Yeah.
But other than that, I really am quite conscious of what I do and what I put in my body now. I trained, I got a PT, I started to go to the gym, and mainly for mental, because, I needed to refocus my brain and stop being so hard on myself. So the gym is actually such a good thing for you mentally, because, if I really do feel like, and I know the signs now if I'm struggling, I'm quite aware of the signs, I'm in a little bit, I'm in a little bit of a bad place again. So, now I know what I need to do. Get your ass to the gym. And I think I can go in a little shell, but I do say to my friends, look, I'm not ignoring you. I just need a week, to refocus my brain. Can't speak to anybody. I need to just, get back on track, and they're the things that I do.
Brilliant?
Yeah. And, and all my friends notice now, they're like, oh, Emma's, she's not ignoring us. She's just in a little zone again.
I read something yesterday, which sometimes doing nothing is doing something.
I have to do that. And it seems like I'm shutting myself away, but it's completely different to the way I used to shut myself away when Jlloyd first passed away. I was shutting myself away because I was grieving and, and I was just coping.
Because you were down.
And I was putting one foot in front of the other every single day.
Day by day.
Yeah. Whereas now it's because I know and I think, right, I need to get out this little phase that I'm in, go to the gym, focus. I have to really pull myself back and focus. Otherwise, my mind just goes everywhere. It just spirals away with myself.
Going back to the relationship piece, it's not just about you, is it, Emma? I think people often forget this. There's two people in a relationship. And I know it's the obvious thing to say.
Yeah.
But somebody coming into your life needs to be compassionate empathetic, understanding what you've been through. Because I'm sure, whether you want to air this publicly or not, it would not surprise me if you would, perhaps in those two that you dipped your toe in, there's some trust issues coming up. You were suspecting, because you've been cheated on. So these things they take time, but it's not just all you to do it. It's the other person as well. They have a responsibility. We all do. When we come into a relationship, it's to understand what that other person has been through, their pain points, and even their trigger points as well, because, it's difficult. It's difficult for the other person. So would you agree with that? So that,
Yeah, I do agree with that. But I was very lucky because the two guys were actually really quite,
right.
sympathetic and good about, and they were both really nice guys.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't in a good place, so I wasn't able to give them what they needed or wanted, and I couldn't therefore stay and give them to make them happy when I wasn't happy myself. I had to at some point take a good look in the mirror and evaluate myself and what I wanted and where I was going wrong, because I've got trauma, and I've got probably bad traits that I do in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's me being conscious of what I do next. I don't want to bring any mistakes or any, which is why I'm completely on my own right now, fully focused on myself, not talking to anybody, and I think that's been really good for me. It's been really good for growth and learning a lot about myself.
I think what you're identifying here is so amazing that you've been able to do that, because you're looking both literally in the mirror, but metaphorically in the mirror as well, because you're saying, okay, I'm making myself accountable. These are my things that I need to deal with for me primarily, which is the right thing to do. But should somebody now come into my life, I'm ready. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people cannot do that. They're in denial, oh no, it's them, it's this, it's that. There's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with all of us, if we're honest.
Yeah.
If we're honest, there's something wrong with all of us. Every single one of us has got some demons in the closet, a bit of trauma, past whatever, trigger points, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But well done you. That's really brave of you to share that, because that is like, a lot of people don't do that. It's sole accountability. And again, you're not blaming yourself. You're just saying, these are my things
that I needed to
and I'm going to work on them.
Yeah. And I think that's why I've come so far over the last year and a half, because I know what I want from my life going forward. I needed to deal with all them emotions and take accountability for where I was going wrong and deal with the trauma because, I was pushing it down and, and using things to block it out.
Yeah.
But in that realization, it was, in order to deal with this and come head on with it now, I've got to not mask it and with the drink and, with lying in my bed. And
let's not forget, you're doing this on your own.
Yeah.
You've not got a partner with you holding your hand and walking you through it. You're doing this on your own, which is even more commended. I think it's incredible. We're going to talk about something that you're working on at the moment, aren't we? And we'll weave that in, because when you were in this primary spot of making sure your kids were okay, you used to do a little exercise with them, didn't you?
Yes,
Each
I
day.
did, yeah.
Tell us about that, because I was like, oh my God, we should all do this. It's amazing. Go on.
And I don't even know where it came from actually, but every day my daughter was only 8 when my husband passed away. God. And the boys were like 12, 13 or 13, 14. I can't keep up with how old they all are now. I even forget the names sometimes, when you shout in the house, Jovan, Kyle. I remember my mum used to do that as well. So I am getting older. Every day we used to, we'd sit and have dinner together, because they were younger as well. It's very hard to do that now with all their schedules.
Sure.
But we did used to do an exercise where every evening we'd say, what's your highs and lows been of the day? So we do 3 highs, 3 lows. And it was such a good thing to do with them, because it would make them realise that. So we've still got things to be grateful for.
God, I love that.
But it would also give me a really good insight into what my children were feeling and thinking. Wow. And even my daughter just one day said, my low today was not being line leader at school. You wouldn't think something so trivial of not being line leader at at school would be such a big thing for her, but it was a real big thing for her. You know, she was 8 years old. She was obviously grieving in her own little kid way, and she was upset because she wasn't line leader, you know, and there was just like loads of different things. And obviously one of our lows was always that Daddy wasn't there. That was for a long time.
Yeah.
But then, you know, some days there was no lows.
Wow.
You know, and they would literally sit there and say, "We haven't got a low today, Mummy."
Wow.
And that would make me feel really good, because it was like, we're doing good, you know. And it's really nice to reflect back on how far you've come. God, I'm getting quite upset talking about that, actually.
It's okay. Take a pause if you want to.
I know, yeah. I don't know why I've got so upset.
No, it's fine. It is an emotional piece, Emma. When you told me, I remember when we spoke before we came on air, we had a little chat, and I got emotional when you shared that with me. I think it's incredible. It's just, we should all do it, you know? I mean, we talk about, a lot of people talk about journaling and this and that and how powerful it is when we write down.
Well, I'm doing that now. So obviously because of what we went through, and it's very easy for me to talk about now because we've, you know, I'm not fully healed, by the way. You know, I think there's growth in all of us forever.
There is.
You know, I think we're always learning and we're always evolving.
None of us are the finished deal. None of us.
But
work in progress, every single one of us.
Yeah, and for me, with the highs and lows and journaling, it really did help, and it creates good family discussions.
Yeah.
And gives you a huge insight. So for me, it was really important to bring out these journals, which I am bringing out now, finally. I've been saying it for years, but it's actually here now. Of highs and lows and you know, journaling what you've been going through. And I've done quite a lot of things which are coming out as well for children. You know, in you know, just downloadable versions for parents to print out, you know, like colouring exercises, and then I've got a grief jar, which, to be honest with you, somebody told me to do when my children were at very first, when they first passed. It was one of my good friends, and she brought me this jar, and it's just like just a jar, and it had loads of little pieces of paper in, and we were encouraged to write down memories of Jlloyd, you know, every day, because you do forget. You know, unfortunately, you do forget little things that you want to remember, and some days you remember, and some days you don't. And you don't want to forget, you know, some of the nice memories. So you write this down, put it back in the jar, and then you can look back in a year's time.
Oh, wow.
You know, or 2 years or 3 years, you know, at least you've got them little things that, and it shows you, once again, I'm all about growth now. So I'm doing the personalised grief jars for, you know, for children, for adults, for whoever's going through something
Let's just
similar.
loop back to this highs and lows, though, because this is a piece now that we want to talk about to give you the opportunity to let people know about this more, because this is a brand and a product and a thing that you're bringing out. But I just want to go back to that moment when you're, and I know it's upset you, so I don't want to upset you. I don't want to upset you.
No,
it's not my intention. But I just think, isn't it beautiful that you sat down as a family writing your highs and lows, and you've got a mix of boys and girls, you've got different age groups. And as you say, sometimes you would think, really, that's your low?
Yeah.
Like, it's so trivial. But it isn't, because to that young girl, that's really important.
It was really important.
So as a family, as a collective, were you then openly discussing that with each other? I'm guessing so.
Yeah, so it, like I said, it would encourage, you know, great communication with me and my children, and great communication, like discussions with the family, you know, because then we'd discuss it. You know, we'd discuss everything that they said, you know. Yes, your low is that Daddy's not here anymore, but what are your highs? So what can we be grateful for? Because, you know, we've still got a lot to be grateful for. Look at your highs. What were your highs of today?
I think gratitude is underestimated.
I think it's become a lot more popular now, you know, manifesting and gratitude, and, you know, and treating people how you want to be treated back, you know, and I really do think it's become a lot more popular. It's just being more self-aware of what you're doing.
What I'm hearing, Emma, throughout this story of yours, and knowing the brief interactions I've had, and you kindly sharing this today on the show, is that you personally have transformed. You've looked at yourself, as we say, physically, but you've looked at yourself mentally.
Yeah.
You've then grown with your children as well. So from pain, extreme adversity, has come good out of it.
Yeah.
And you're now launching something called Highs and Lows, yeah?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
highs and lows is a journal for, to write down what you're going through and look back at how far you've come.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yes.
That is the thing. Because you've come a long way. Your children have come a long way.
100%.
What's the future looking like for you guys? Tell us the future for your children if you want to. You don't have to share that. But tell us what you would like your future to look like, what you want to achieve, what you want to be. What is the 2.0 version of Emma? How is it going to emerge?
Well, firstly, we all want to be happy, and I just want to be happy.
Oh, bless you.
And I am happy.
You are? Yeah.
But I would like to meet somebody now. I do feel like I've been on my own for
do you think that would complete you?
Yeah, I'm ready now to have somebody in my corner. I am doing it all on my own, and I think getting upset again now with that. I don't know why, because it's a good thing.
No, but it's evoking emotion inside you. That's all it is. It's just natural.
Yeah. I'm ready now to meet somebody and have somebody who's there for me, because I'm there for everybody. So initially, to be happy, grow, keep improving, and push my business and my business, I want to, if it's for me, helping other people. I do have an academy for teeth whitening, but, the grief side, we're touching base on that today just because of my story and what we're talking about. Obviously, I just want to see all my children grow, grandbabies one day. And, I just have this vision of having all my little grandbabies around. I'm too old now. I'm definitely having no more children. But, just having all my little grandbabies around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And seeing my children achieve all their dreams and us all. I want to make Jlloyd proud, that.
What about making Emma proud?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
What about making
I do
Emma
need
proud?
to do that a lot. I need to work on that.
I think put yourself in the centre just for once. I do, Emma.
Yeah,
I think you deserve that.
My son plays football. I'd love to see him, smash it and do absolutely amazing.
This is your middle child, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter, I'd love to see her on stage. And my son, my eldest son, he's just our rock for the whole family. He's amazing with business and he's amazing with his career and his entrepreneurial skills.
Yeah.
So for me to see them thrive and doing amazing is the greatest achievement.
You've heard a great story today, I think. And thank you, Emma, for coming in and sharing it. If people want to get hold of you, because you'll do personal appearances, you'll do public speaking, you'll do other events for people as well. What's the best way for people to find you?
So, I've obviously got my Instagram, which is open, because I think it's quite nice for people to see, my real life. Yeah. With my kids and how they're progressing and what I'm doing. And then I did set up actually when Jlloyd first passed away, Wag to Widow. So my Instagram is Emma J Samuel.
Okay, there you go.
And then I had another one that I set up. It's quite a corny name actually, Wag to Widow.
Right, okay.
And it was quite relevant at the time when I set it up.
Sure.
And I've decided to just go along with that because it's where I was talking about, what I was going through at the time.
Yep.
And I paused on it for a good 2-3 years because I wasn't in a good place.
Yep.
I'm picking that back up now because I do think that's going to be the place where, I can push my products and push helping people through my story, and if I can help other people from what I've been through and show them that you can come out the other end, you can, and it's not easy, but you can do it. You can thrive again. You can smile again. You can, move forward as best you can. And one day it just seems like it just clicks and all seems to fit into place again.
Yeah. I think you're a classic example of taking small steps, but consistently.
Yes.
You are.
Do you agree?
It is worth mentioning again, if you don't mind, that, you can find on Netflix, ITVX, Disney, The Footballer, His Wife, and The Crash. But don't expect to see the version that you're seeing today on that show because you look so different. You look so different in a good way. Yeah. So, but thank you, Emma. Thank you for coming on to So What's Your Story.
Thank you for having me.
Is there one last thing you would like to share? Something that, maybe you even discovered through your highs and lows with your children, or a pearl of wisdom, or not? We can just leave it there. But is there one last thing you'd like to say, maybe?
Just keep positive and just know that whatever you're going through, there will be another high at some point. So keep going.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you for having me.